welcome everybody to our new program, PETXPERT Talks. This is a totally new format for us, and it is actually the short form of the communication with our pet experts. And actually, Marcel, you are the first one to open this with us, as it was partially your idea as well. So we have to celebrate it by asking you to be our first guests. We have prepared prepared a series of 5 interviews for the next 3 months, and you are the first one. And together we have discussed what would be the perfect topic to start the first talks with. And we agreed that actually the changes in human food influences a lot the pet food, and we would like to know more from you how this will influence the pet food industry. We know that for many years, trends are copied straight from the human sector to the pet food sector, even if the pets are not humans and they are fed on the prepared complete diets. So the questions like where our industry is going, how this will influence the pet food sector, what will be the consequences, would be really nice to hear your opinion on. Okay. And just before we start, I would like to make as well a short introduction of you for the guests, for the people that will watch us through our PETXPERT YouTube channel. Our guest, PETXPERT guest today with us is Marcel Blok. He's the CEO of the company called Change Stranomics. The company exists more than 25 years. Marcel is actually in the pet food industry around 40 years. He was the president of IAMS Pet Foods International, the first person to establish the Eukanuba brand IAMS and Eukanuba in Europe. And from 1995, Marcel has started his own company, where he is consulting the strategy and the changes, instructing the changes for the small and medium-sized pet food companies. So Marcel, thank you very much for being today with us, and I think we can start the interview with a question: where our industry is going.
Okay, I thank you very much for the introduction. It's always difficult to try and catch close to 40 years in the industry in only a few sentences, but you managed very well, I must say. You mentioned it. The industry, our industry, so to speak, is influenced. Of course, there are different influences, but as I see it, the main influence in our industry, certainly nowadays, as regards the nutritional side, are coming from not necessarily from science. They come from what is happening in the human food industry. I always say, let's not forget one thing, and that is that our buyers, the pet owners, are also buyers of human food, and they have opinions, they have feelings, they have thoughts for human food that they think also apply to what their pet is needing, what is necessary to have the pet in the best possible condition. We all know that that is not necessarily true, and we all know that there have been trends and still are trends in the market that in actual fact were developed more or less in the wake of what was going on in human food. If I say grain-free is not an invention from pet food. Grain-free was something that became a trend. It started obviously as a hype. It became a trend in human food, and some pet food manufacturers, particularly in the US, were ready to sort of translate that idea of grain-free into the pet food world. I do not believe, but certainly Milka, you can correct me on that there was substantial scientific evidence that grain-free was the best after sliced bread. If you want to say it was grain. But it happens, and all of a sudden it's like the snowball rolling down. All of a sudden it got momentum, and momentum always leads to something. Certainly also in our industry, and that momentum creates followers. And the more followers there are, the more prominent the message seems to become. Nobody bothers about is it true or not. It is a message that is conveyed to the market. And consumers accept that because, wisely or not, they still have a degree of trust in what the industry says. And that is what it should be. Are there nowadays doubts about grain-free? And then grain-free is just one of these examples. I believe there are. To the best of my knowledge, and this probably is an exaggeration, yes, let's say intolerance and hence grain-free came about. In pet food, it became a bit better known probably 7-8 years ago, and some research at that moment indicated that there were certain dogs susceptible to there were some intolerance. Don't ask me, I don't know about it. But then research showed that it was more a specific kind of breed, and what I do recall, this breed was the Airedale Terrier. And I can tell you one thing: if you look it up, Airedale Terriers do not come into the top 10 of popular dog breeds.
Yeah, dog breeds, yeah.
What I want to say is that things have been taken out of proportion, and nobody bothered too much about is there evidence, is there scientific evidence, and that is how all of a sudden this grain-free, call it a movement, became so influential that our trade partners and the consumer all of a sudden said that you were not the best pet food manufacturer if you did not have grain-free. So it's all about perception. It's all about changes in the human food industry. Another example, and this started already in let's say in the mid 90s, late 90s maybe. All of a sudden we were looking at natural pet food. Natural pet food for me is something that even after 40 years I find difficult to explain. First of all, natural does not have any regulatory basis. Natural does not figure. So in that respect, it's very difficult. And it became, certainly in the US, and we then still tended to follow what was happening in the US and Europe. What happened was, all of a sudden we saw here natural pet food, and nobody bothered to explain what they actually meant. Natural was more or less opposed to unnatural, and unnatural pet food doesn't exist as far as I can see. So what happened was our industry blindly took the examples of the human food industry and followed in that path. We still see natural pet food, and I still find it difficult to find a proper definition that can put natural pet food in a proper category. These are, let's say, slightly older examples. Nowadays, we do see examples in pet food that are maybe not yet prominent, but that, in my point of view, will become prominent, and one of these examples is plant-based. If we look at plant-based in human food, again, a lot of these things sort of start in the US. I think for the very simple reason that they have a consolidated market. US is an enormous market size-wise, and when we compare that to Europe, we still tend to think in terms of countries. So let's say the incentive to start development and to invest in development in the US is more, let's say, I wouldn't say logical, but more evident than it may be, and sometimes is in Europe. But still, what happens is people see, for reason, particularly younger people, and certainly not people from the established forces, if you want, in the industry. It is all these new developments about plant-based come from people outside of the established industry. Plant-based does not come from people in the food industry. It came from people who had an idea that plant-based, not for vegetarian reasons or for vegan reasons, much more for a concern about the environment and global warming.
Sustainability, yes, sustainability reason.
Sustainability. And that is what triggered these developments. Mostly younger people who started and who still had the age of saying, well, you might say that it can't work, but we're going to try it anyway. These are the younger people, whether here or anywhere else, who nowadays are at the forefront of new developments. Yeah. And they were picked up by investors. And these were certainly at the beginning not investors that came from the food industries or let alone the pet food industry. These were investors that came from the tech industry. Bill Gates is an investor in plant-based or meat analogs or whatever you call it. Is Richard Branson, let's say, a long list of names not coming from the human food or the pet food industry. They were the ones that sort of fueled the development of plant-based. In essence, they are the ones that fuel the development of new, not comparable to what we've done before. And later on, I would say 3-4 years after we saw the first development and the development as such became known, the human industry, human food industry, started to say, well, this may be more than just a small future niche. This may be something that becomes important, that becomes significant. And what we now see is that the multinational food companies start to invest heavily. And when I say heavily, they're talking 100 million, as if that is pocket money. They start to invest heavily in plant-based, cultured meat, everything that is not traditional, let me put it like that. That is all on the ingredient side.
Do you think that the plant-based can be such a strong movement, like, for example, the grain-free option? Do you think that this will really live so much in the pet food segment? What do you think? especially based, we are trying to prove that dogs are carnivores, they should eat meat, and then suddenly this plant-based boom. How do you think this will really influence the pet food industry?
Okay. And first of all, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm certainly not a scientist. But what I've seen is that there is sufficient proof that plant-based can work. Let me put it like that. Let's start with dog. Apparently, with cat, it is virtually impossible because plants will no. In general, the recipes will lack key ingredients. Let me put it like that. I believe, first of all, and it's all about perception. Dogs, are they carnivores? No, they're omnivores. So that is a good start.
This is discussable. I would be sure that many of our the people that will watch this video will say no, they are not an omnivore. So it is still a discussion out there with the experts, veterinarians, biologists. Are they or not? But I do agree with you. I think that if the plant movement is so strong, they will pull this ticket of dogs are omnivores, and they have been eating the plant-based proteins in the diet for many years now.
And I think that that there is more than enough proof that certainly dogs have been since the days that documentation about that started, have been eating both animal substances and vegetable substances. Yeah. And the nice thing about it is that animals, much better than human beings, have a very good feel for what is good for them and what is not. Yeah. Okay, coming back to what will be the influence of plant-based. Personally, I am convinced that plant-based will become a segment in pet food, dog food. Because let's say the reasons for people to think and do plant-based are not necessarily linked to ingredients. So in that respect, it's not comparable to grain-free or something that relates to ingredients. Plant-based is much more about the origin of the ingredients and the carbon footprint related to the ingredients, the sustainability of the ingredients. What is the impact on climate change? All these things matter, and that is where I see on the human food side that we see a growing number of so-called flexitarians. Flexitarians are the people that have said or say, we do not do meat days a week anymore. We do meat 4 days a week, and we alternate it with or cheese or egg or something plant-based. There is this movement in the world where people start to change their eating habits, yeah, mostly because they have a concern about, as I said, about the environment, the climate change, everything that you can put under the umbrella of sustainability. And that is something, and now I come back to the influence of this consumer. If the consumer says, for myself, I'm trying to be conscious about the environment. I try to be a a sustainability conscious consumer, will they put up another hat and do not do exactly the same for their animals? I don't believe that. It's a mindset. Yeah.
Interesting.
Therefore, it's not, I believe, no, I'm convinced that plant-based will become a fixed item on the pet food shelf. And whether that is a proper shelf or an online shelf, that is totally irrelevant. It will become, if you want, it will become a sustainable category industry.
So what is your opinion then if we start to eat more plant-based materials, how this will influence the availability of the animal-based ingredients?
Okay. Well, there are, let's say, quite some developments actually, as far as I can see it. Let's start at the other end, and that is waste. Waste is not about changing feeding habits. Waste is something that happens, and gradually we become conscious of wasting foodstuffs. What I've read, and let's assume that is true. What I've read is that from field to fork worldwide, 40% of the food is wasted.
Yes, correct.
Let's not go into detail of how do we feed the world population, but waste is an issue. Waste is also an issue, let's say, for human food, where we can see it, where we can react and do something. I will give a few examples. One example is a very small pet treat company. I hope they're not part of the audience when I say very small, but a treat company in Ireland. They have their business based on collecting meat in supermarkets that is gone over the sell-by date, so not sold anymore, and turn that into pet treats. Instead of, I assume, the alternative is to throw it away, to put it in the bin, bring it to the landfill. Whatever you do, you waste it. Now it retains a certain value. It's used for another initiative on the supermarket side is that they say 2 days before the sell-by date. This is all about fresh product, of course, with a short shelf. They now say we do not wait until the last day. If this pack of hamburgers is not sold sold before a certain date, we have a price of 50%. So it is not wasted. It one way or another ends up in the caddy, in the basket. Another type of waste, and for me it's staggering, but it happens frequently actually. We all know that when we go to the supermarket, and which is for quite a lot of foodstuff, our main source of supply. What we see is that we need to have, I always say, very straight cucumbers. If not, we cannot shrink wrap. Cucumber, one characteristic, they they do not always grow in a totally straight form. So the bent cucumber is waste. This is um, on the vegetables. If we go to the meat side, um, and we start to imagine what is wasted in out of home consumption, yeah. In Holland, maybe a bit less prominent than in the US, but um, what I see is we still throw a lot of food bad way. And that brings me to the feeling of, might this be excellent fit into pet food, because at least it's human grade. Well, this was a bit cynical, but you see what I mean. We're wasting. Doing something against that waste means that we actually need less production.
Yeah, exactly. Is it really ethical to overproduce and then feed it to pets while the half of the planet is hungry?
Yeah, sorry, but how do you mean exactly?
No, but we are wasting a lot of food. That's of course another topic, not for this interview, but then we say maybe it will be good for the pet food. Is it really ethical to overproduce, not sell it to a human population and then sell it to a pet food while the half of the planet is hungry? This what was the question, or the constant is just what pops up into my mind.
I do understand the question perfectly well. I fear that the answer will lead to another question, and we will need probably more than 3 hours to come to conclusion, and the conclusion might be that we totally disagree. So let's go
Yes,
to something
let's
else.
park it. But then I would like to go back to the how this let's say how this will influence the plant. Let's go back to the plant trend. How this will influence the animal-based ingredients availability if we start to consume so much plant ingredients.
Well, yes, the animal waste. If we say plants, every piece of non-meat that is not eaten will not be slaughtered.
Yes.
And if we don't slaughter, I find it very difficult to have byproducts for pet food. So a decrease in human meat consumption leads to, I'm exaggerating, but leads to a shortage in animal byproducts. And we see another trend, and that is that in certain regions in the world, people throw away less of the animal that is slaughtered, and we see that. For instance, take China, where people eat parts of animals that in Europe and in the US, let's say in general in the Western world, are thrown away or are byproducts. The more we can ship from here, so-called byproducts, to China, because there they are either delicacies or at least is human food, the less it becomes available for pet food. All these influences in changing eating habits, everything, are not in favor of, let's say, the availability of the byproducts that we need as an industry. Are there ways to cope with that? I think there are. By the way, this is one example of less slaughtering. Let me pick up on less slaughtering, and that is cultured meat. Yeah, I always say one stem cell equals 100,000 hamburgers. Yeah. Cultured meat has reached the state of scalability. It will become a viable commercial proposition. If and when that happens, I don't even ask myself if it happens. When that happens, I wonder how many cows or pigs you need to slaughter to get your cutlet or your whatever in the evening. That these are influences, and if this happens and it becomes really big scale, we have a very serious problem in industry. I can tell you that. Yeah.
So definitely, you think if the cultured meat becomes a mainstream, we will have an issue with the supply of the animal byproducts, of course, for the pet food.
I am convinced of that. I am convinced because if cultured meat, or whatever you call it, let's say cultured meat, becomes, let's say, part of a habit, and obviously not for the whole world, but becomes part of a habit, it does mean that it replaces something. Let's say meat consumption will not increase because there will be cultured meat. So every kilogram or ton of cultured meat that is sold and obviously consumed will be taken from the amount of tons that is normally slaughtered. So yeah, it will have impact on our industry.
So what do you think are alternatives if this happens?
I think that the alternatives will be, and we see these developments. Obviously there are insects, and of course people nowadays they say, yeah, but that's very expensive, and we cannot use that in pet food. But that is denying change. Yeah, there will come a time that it's not expensive anymore, and that it can be used in pet food. It's all about if you reason from let's say a small pilot plant kind of setup. Yes, it's very expensive. Once it becomes an industry in its own right, you can reach enormous economies of scale. And let's not forget the other thing, and that is if the animal byproducts are not available anymore or not in sufficient quantities, first of all, the price of these animal byproducts will go up.
Yep.
Yeah. And the quantities will never be available to satisfy the industry.
Yeah, mass production, yes.
So it's not a matter of will we accept it? It's probably a matter of we have to accept it. If not, it will be difficult to survive. So let's say the balance of power is, if you want, is shifting. Yeah, from the demand of the pet food industry, it's shifting to the supply of the alternatives.
Mm. So like you say, we have to adapt. This is what you usually say. We have to make change and adapt.
First, well, change is essential, and it is not only about insects. Worldwide, there is an increasing consumption of fish. Yeah. Lots of governments pay handsome amounts and subsidies to promote and to work on aquaculture, as you know that much better than I, to become less dependent upon land animals as a feeding source, as a food source. So fish is an alternative source, an alternative protein, fat, whatever source, byproduct source. Let me put it. And that is another example. At the same time, we see developments in algae. Yeah. I think that, and then it will probably come from the food industry, that there are developments in searching for, finding and processing, let's say, alternative proteins, where the key is that it will be done in a sustainable way. And that will be the biggest game changer that I see in at least the coming 10 years. Not only finding alternatives, it's finding sustainable alternatives. Yes.
So ingredients like insects, algae, fish byproduct is something that you could see as an alternative.
I definitely see that as an alternative to, let's say, to byproducts of land species in general, because we simply are running into the direction of not having land enough. Yeah. So we need to find other ways to simply to produce proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, because that's what we're talking about.
I will return a little bit back to cultured meat. As you know, this is the topic that you have been one of the first that mentioned this topic, and I really think it's an interesting topic. Do you think that the consumers will accept or will demand the cultured meat in the pet food? Do you think this would be acceptable? Is this a future as well?
Sorry, plant-based pet food?
No, cultured meat.
Oh, that is a good one. Any consumer that thinks about it more than a few seconds will understand that the backgrounds of cultured meat, the development was to give a larger portion of the world population access to better quality proteins. Yeah. If we then say yes, but this would be nice for pet, I don't believe that works.
Well, you never know what people come. You know, we are witnessing that pet food producers, the new brand owners, they want to be different, and the different is what it sells. And yes. And you never know what people might think. Okay, maybe if we produce pet food with cultured meat, it's something new, it's something sustainable. Maybe.
It is new, it is sustainable compared to what we currently use in pet food. Whether that's fresh or meal doesn't matter very much. It will be much more expensive, not a little more expensive. It will be much more expensive. And in the end, that would mean that we are probably talking about tripling, let's say, the price of pet food, let's say, on a per ton basis. And it, yes, there may be people that would be interested in that only because it is different. Will that have any influence in the market? I don't believe so.
Interesting. I remember 5 years ago when I was asked about insects in the pet food, and I was very negative. Oh my, no, I would never give this to my dog. But now, after 5 years, and the question 5 years ago about the insects was, no, it's too expensive. It's still not available possible. So you never know what can happen with cultured meat in the future. Maybe the IT sector invests so much money, you never know.
Yes, there is. You see, the developments come from a different side. Insect is how can we turn waste in high quality protein. Cultured meat has got nothing to do with waste.
Yeah, true. True. Okay, for the end, before I say thank you, Marcel, and we ask the attendees to ask you some questions, I would like to ask you, what is your opinion? Can you tell me and our audience the 3 trends that you expect in the next 5 years to be copied from human food to pet food?
Oh, that's
from the head.
From the head, but and this is not ingredient related, because we talked about, let's say, plant-based, etc., etc. But what I see and that is much more what consumer expectations that you already see in human food. There where brands and manufacturers at least take it into consideration. Let us not underestimate 3 things. And I know that sustainability is becoming a bit of a generic word, but let's say sustainability becomes a selector. All look for more sustainable, which means that manufacturers need to be more transparent in their communication, because you can say that your product is a sustainable product and fine, but as long as you don't prove it, you have nothing. So say it, prove it, be transparent. The other thing that I see is certainly in human food is what I call ingredient integrity. The ingredients have a function. They're not there for the fun anymore. They have a function. Products in general become a bit more serious on the human food side. That is what I see, and maybe I'm biased in my perception. Yeah. So ingredient integrity, much less call it marketing ingredients that look nice on the label, but if you put it in, explain why you do it. What is the function? What does it do? Yeah, that is something you see in human food. And the other thing that you see is the aspect of more local meaning, and you see it when you look at the list of acquisitions of the global multinationals in human food, you more and more see that they acquire a certain smaller, mostly smaller company that is known in a smaller region in either country or yeah, mainly a country, because they make these nice whatevers, the Bavarian sausage or it is much more close than far away. And that is a trend that I see in human food. Just pay attention to it yourself and look at what is changing on the shelves in the supermarket. The offer of, call it close by food items, is increasing to the detriment of the guava from Peru. And that's not because we're nationalistic. No, that is part of our perception, our belief in sustainability. And do not ask people to give, let's say, explanation. That is not necessary. It is a trend. Yeah. And that is human food. And I'm convinced that there will come a time, and actually it is high time as far as I'm concerned, that we say for pet food, nothing wrong with local. Or to put it in other words, if humans can survive on what is available around the corner, maybe our pets can as well.
Thank you very much, Marcel. This was really inspiring conversation. I believe we have some, I hope we have some questions from our attendees, because now it is a perfect moment for them to ask if they have some question. No, we don't have any questions.
Maybe we can just give them a possibility to ask a question in the chat function or Q&A.
That's an option.
Yeah, then we have one question from Greta. She asks how to handle plant-based versus nutritional requirements, cats and dogs.
How to handle plant-based? Yeah, I think, but now you're asking me an expert question on an expertise that I don't have. So that's very good. What I would say is there is sufficient evidence that plant-based can do what it is supposed to do, as long as you stick to the norms. And the norms are, as far as I understand it, not based on it has to be meat. No, it has to meet certain nutritional criteria, and where it comes from apparently is not most important. But I think, Milka, that is much more in your corner than mine.
Yes, I mean, I can try to answer Greta. Greta, me as a nutritionist and a formulation person, I am getting more and more requests for formulating such diets, and I have formulated my first vegetarian diet. I think it was 7-8 years ago. It's quite a long time, and it was not very popular because it was we were right in the middle of the dog is a wolf trend. So that one was sparked, and in the last 3 years, I have a lot of requests to formulate such diets, and if we can provide nutrients from that are necessary for from the growth and maintenance of the pet system, it's possible to make a good plant-based diet. But we have another issues. It's how they will test the palatability. So far, we have made the good diets, and I think it will more and more diets to come. Do I think this is the best for the pets? I would stick to the animal proteins if you ask me. So, but as a nutritionist, but I am becoming more and more open to finding a solution to make the pet food more sustainable. But if I have to choose, I would stick to animal proteins. But this is another topic and the topic for another interview. There are more questions, Julia.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to wait for your explanation. It was interesting to hear your opinion. Magnus Pettersson is asking, in human food, we see now that a lot of plant-based products has a lot of additives to make a structure like meat. And I think this will become a big issue when people start to analyze what they really eat. Do you think this will be more of an issue in the future?
Again, these are what I would like to call technical questions. What I am convinced about is that if it becomes an issue that is seen by the people that make the plant-based products, yeah, they will do their stinking best to remedy it as soon as possible, because they have a vested interest in making things work, and not only a vested interest, but they poured a hell of a lot of money into either buying companies or in developing the process. Maybe the answer is it's part of the learning process, and as soon as something is perceived to be negative by consumers, they will remedy it. That is my sincere feeling.
Thank you, Marcel, for the answer. We have one more question. For plant-based diets, it's important to ensure that the key nutrition that could be lacking in plant-based are balanced. For example, vitamins A and D, iron, zinc, copper, amino acids, choline, B vitamins, etc. The key thing to remember is to use non-gelatin coated vitamins. And also to remember that vegan diet cannot be complete due to vitamin D coming from lanolin. I can cover this in more detail when I do my interview.
Excellent.
That's true. That was Cara from Premium Nutrition, and yes, she's doing interview in 4 weeks, so she will talk more about it.
Okay, very good. As I said, I'm certainly not an expert in the field. What I do understand, having talked to people who really are in the know, is that actually quite a lot of so-called vegan diets are not nutritionally balanced and complete, at least not in the way it should be according to current norms. But really, that is the only thing I know about it. And as soon as I hear about there may not be enough of X, Y, or Z in the diet, I think that the use of premixes in pet food currently is because there is not enough of X, Y, or Z in the ingredients. So if you look about the balancer, or as the Spanish actually call it, the corrector, can you have a corrector in plant-based? Call them vegan or whatever. Pet food? Maybe. I don't know.
Interesting. We have one more question from Marco. He asked, while we are talking about the plants, what do you think about the use of CBD in pet food?
That's a good one.
Marcel, what do you think? Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good one. What do you think?
I think that with CBD we are with a lot of other things. We are in a first stage of finding out, and I will never call it trial and error because I cannot think of what the others could be. But it is early stages. If it is to improve the animal's diet, and you can for yourself define what this improvement is. If it is to improve the environment, if it is for ecological reasons, that is fine. And let's say if it is positive, that's great. If it's only for the sake, and I mean that in general for developments, if it's only for the sake to lower the cost price of your formulation and make more profit, appear that you're looking at a very short-term solution, and very short-term solutions have overall a very short-term effect. They're not sustainable.
Thank you, Marcel, for your answer.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. If there is no further questions, then it is time for us to say one more time, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This was our first interview, and I will share my screen with you all. I hope you see it. So Marcel, thank you very much. It was our pleasure, and we hope we will talk soon about other topics. In the meantime, we will have our next interview in the 2 weeks with Per-Olav Gausreide, who is international mashing champion. He will be talking about the feeding of the sledge dog, the habits and nutrition, and the routines, and his experience. So join us in 2 weeks' time again, the same place, the same time. And thank you very much to everybody who participated today's meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Milka, and I wish everybody an excellent afternoon that is coming for most of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.